it means Indian exchange rate is basically undervalued in terms of that based on this index. This index is actually introduced by the famous weekly from London as economists. They introduced this concept, Big Mac index, and every 6 months you can see in the Economist how Big Macs are actually changing. Other example, how can you determine the exchange rate of a particular country is actually overvalued? For example, in Sweden, if the cost of that burger in Sweden may be $4, but in New York it is $3. That simply explains Swedish currency is basically overvalued in terms of purchasing power parity analysis. Is another important aspects of McDonald's is basically supply chain management. That defined by, if you see the picture of the Mac burger or McDonald's burger in India, you have different components of that burger. You start from seeds, sesame seeds, then you consider buns, then you consider lettuce, then you consider vegetable patty, cheddar cheese, butter, and brooding, and then you consider the special vegetarian sauces, which are basically eggless, because sauces, major components of the sauces are basically egg, but Indian sausage is basically eggless. Now, these are basically the products produced by different microeconomic agents or producers, and McDonald's is actually efficiently making liaison with these companies, which is basically strong supply chain network. For example, sesame seeds from Ghaziabad, Uttar Pradesh is supplied by a particular supplier. Buns from Sabidar and Sons, which is basically from Maharashtra and Ludhiana. Then the lettuce from Tikia Agriculture and all those things is basically supplied from Dehradun, a farm and one of the farm located in Meerut and Delhi. Cheddar cheese is actually supplied by Dynamic Dairy from Maharashtra. Then butter and brooding is actually supplied by a company in Ludhiana. Vegetable patty is actually supplied by a farm which is located in Maharashtra. And then finally, the eggless sauce is actually supplied by a company in Punjab. So these are the products actually supplied by various agencies, and ultimately, when they supplied, each of them have their own profit motives. Ultimately, why they are making, you are satisfied with the burger, despite the fact they are all produced by different agencies. So strong supply chain management is important in this context to get a burger from McDonald's. Driven by affordability and brand recognition factors. Now, the way they basically identified the regions or the locality, one aspect is the affordability, the second aspect is the brand recognitions. If you have chosen a less prosperous regions, but the people in that area are not at all aware of the McDonald's burger or McDonald's, the food chain company, then it should be a complete failure. So it's basically a deliberate strategy by McDonald's to choose those places, the affordability, people can afford it, and then the brand recognition means the McDonald's, they know the name. The Noida is basically located very close to Delhi, where BPO industries are located, and there's a growing middle class population with highly literate, skilled populations are residing there. So choosing McDonald's outlets would be the ideal proposition in those locations. Similarly, Gurgaon, the ideal location. Basant Vihar is an ideal location. So these are the places is basically strategically selected. So for affordability are concerned and brand recognitions are concerned. The cultural sensitivity, diversity, religion, veg burger, mayonnaise and ice cream contain no eggs. The Indian population with vegetarian background, diversity, religion biased, the concept veg burger, these are basically sensitivities so far Indian populations are concerned. And to manage this sensitivity was an important task for the McDonald's to adjust it, not to take that one as a competitive trend. So instead, they thought these are the ethos, these are the problems they can manage and in accordance with the given situations. Now, if you see the food preference, so for vegetarian and non-vegetarian concerns, non-vegetarian, so for a macro level India is concerned, 80% of the people are basically non-vegetarian in India. And 17% of them are basically, only 17% are beef eaters. And 20% is only vegetarian. It means that there is a possibility how they took the strategy of a Maharaja burger with the mutton, simply it may click in Indian conditions because they are non-vegetarian, but they prefer mutton, not the other one. That simply explains the food preferences so far McDonald's careful strategies are concerned. Family-centric and child-centric strategy. Now, eating out in the prosperous regions, Saturday, Sunday options you have. So you want to spend time in a restaurant. But if you go to the full-fledged restaurants, typically full-fledged restaurants or Chinese restaurants, it may cost on 5-member family more than 1,000. But if you go to McDonald's, your budget should not be more than 200. And the products, the food offered by McDonald's are, as I mentioned, the strategically selected. They are child-centric because children, if it is child-centric, that simply explains why the child will be interested to come again to McDonald's, because most of the foods are available are basically relating to child-centric strategy. The instant scratch and win prizes on a daily and weekly basis based on the powerful concept of karma in Hinduism and reward for good karma is a prize. Now, it's a kind of Indian ethos, you do the karma, but you don't know the output of the results. And how McDonald's is basically nurtured that situations. The lotteries, if you see the thing, ich karo, rich mano. That means that you don't know the output, but you eat there, but you have the karma, what you have done, you never expect the output. But that output, if you get a lottery, you think that you have done certain thing positive for the society. And that's the reason you got the lottery ticket, something like that. That's called Indian ethos. And McDonald's is actually carefully nurtured that situations, which is basically ich karo and rich bano. It means that you have, if you have done something for the society or for the poor, you feel that you deserve from the God the output. And McDonald's is basically carefully nurtured that strategy. If you consume food in in McDonald's, you get a ticket, and if you are lucky enough, perhaps you may be rich, according to McDonald's philosophy, using the Indian ethos, the karma. Now, what is important here then? The challenge of the McDonald's is that, one, keep on understanding the culture, researching the culture, nurture it, localizations, reflection of the success. These are the major aspects of McDonald's success strategy in India, but they have the challenges. Challenges in terms of even the Indian in general, they feel is basically a multinational product, is basically against our political principles, against our cultural principles. So, if anything happens in India, you will find the target is the McDonald's shops or McDonald's outlets. But McDonald's is basically carefully adjusting India's these challenges with the help of various programs they have started for the children, for the aged populations, for their Happy Meal scheme. All that are basically targeting towards so that the people are not anti-McDonald's. Now, here is the learning so far business schools are concerned. Most of the cases in India, in the business school, we basically are happy with the foreign cases. We thought that these are the important aspects without knowing the culture, without knowing the social ethos. Perhaps this case is basically giving a message to our learners that despite we have problems, but how a company is basically successful adjusting the culture and the social ethos. And if you replicate the foreign cases in Indian business school, and that's bound to be failure. That's the learnings. In other words, the mantra of McDonald's, I repeat, one must think global. The horizon is basically is wide for you or wider for you, but you take your decisions locally because you know the constraints, the impediments, and perhaps this case is giving a certain kind of learnings that how locals or sentiments are adjusted in accordance with our ethos and social structures. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Banik, for a detailed presentation with a lot of emphasis on various aspects of this particular case study. Actually, I have picked up a few points from your presentation, and in the beginning you have mentioned that there are two managing directors, and one is
Amit Jatia,
real estate
yes,
manager, and the other is a vegetarian or something.
Yeah.
Can you please throw some
now,
light on this?
Now, basically, when you are basically in a particular country, theory will argue, you choose those kind of people who are basically comfortable with our food chains and ethos and all that. Interesting here, the question is quite interesting. But McDonald's actually decided to choose not the so-called specialty food chains. They thought these people are quite young, entrepreneur, energetic. Despite one is with a textile background, the other one is with a real estate developer in Delhi, the Bakshi in Delhi and Amit Jatia in Bombay. But they found they're quite enterprising and hardworking, and that perhaps explains why speciality is not at all a determinant factor in choosing them as a partner of McDonald's.
Thank you. And the other aspect which I would like to throw some light on is the spillover aspect. As far as the Indian food chains are concerned, like Nirula's or Sagar, what are the prospects of these food chains, and have they learned anything from this success of McDonald's?
Another important question, when you have the foreign investments, always development thinkers will argue the spillover, whether we are learning from them, or we are basically thought that we will not learn anything. Either we will disappear from the market, close the shops, do other business, or take that what is a challenge for the future. So where Nirulas is concerned, is a strong food chain in India. Initially, there is a shock to Nirulas, because if you see in Delhi particular, certain shops are basically closed because they thought they cannot compete. But if you see how Nirulas is basically adjusted the new situations with more careful strategies, and Nirulas is located in those areas where McDonald's is not located. Nirulas also learn in the process, and if you see the Nirulas food in any outlets, you can find out the wide varieties. Earlier the varieties are very restricted. They have learned in the process. And the second thing is the home delivery systems. Is very strong as far as Nirulas is concerned, and they have also learned from the strategy from the McDonald's. And third is basically children-centric products. Perhaps it's a good learning from Nirulas how basically McDonald's adjusted, and how Nirulas is basically learning in the same process. Another important aspect that you mentioned, the Sagar, the strong southern-based food chain. At the moment, the McDonald's products are not South-centric. Nirulas sorry, not Nirulas. The Shagars, for example, they are basically South-centric recipes they offer. Sometimes, that is according to McDonald's, you need a change from Sagar to southern food to northern food, or some other food. If you need a change, perhaps it's not at all bad for a customer to move from one food taste to another taste. But in terms of supply chain management, in terms of the value for food, perhaps these are the technical things. Shagar also learned a lot of, not recipe-wise, but in terms of technical things, they have learned a lot from McDonald's.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as far as the cultural sensitivities are concerned, you have mentioned few things which were taken care of by the McDonald's. But still certain political parties have gone for rallying in certain pockets of the country. Why so? Can you please explain?
Well, this is a very tricky question, I must say. But what is actually important here is the perceptions that is a multinational company, is all selling the foreign products. That's the perceptions, and which is not true, because as I mentioned that McDonald's is trying to adjust localizations. But well, if you have any problem, then you thought that only McDonald's will be affected. That is also true. But McDonald's is actually trying to adjust the situations by different campaignings. I mentioned the green belt. I mentioned the community-based educations. I mentioned community-based and cultural activities. In the process, McDonald's is trying to reach out to the remotest areas in the process. But in the long run, perhaps the kind of problems which we have now, perhaps it will disappear shortly.
So, as far as you have just now discussed about the location strategy, so far their concentration is mainly on growth pockets. My question is, why not on non-growth pockets?
Again, good question, because perhaps you are arguing that, well, if employments are created, then why not the non-prosperous regions? The employment may create there only. But one thing is very certain here. If you talk about the non-growth pockets, you know, the principle of the opportunity cost of making food, if your costs are high, don't go for eating out. That's the standard thing. So now growth pocket, it may not be, they are basically running on commercial propositions. In non-growth pockets, perhaps even at this stage, it is not, may not be suitable for them or feasible for them to go for employment creation. What is basically important here, they are identifying the region where you have the growth and then you further create growth in terms of creating employment. But it's not a less prosperous or poverty-driven growth where you don't have any incomes at all. Then how come McDonalds will create income with the help of that food chain in a situation when people are not ready to buy their foods?
Okay.
So that's the, it's not direct effect, there may be indirect effects.
Fine. We also discussed about their pricing and the supply chain management. Again, as far as the pricing is concerned, the concentration is more on certain parts of the pockets, you can say. And when we are talking about the supply chain management, how the costs are adjusted?
Well, basically when you look at a farm, the theory says that all the inputs you basically need to produce your own product should be cost friendly, something like that. As I said, McDonald's created those farms or selected those farms in terms of friendly locations, and that simply explains there should not be any kind of infrastructure bottlenecks from supplying food from one part to another. And in the location theory, yeah, it is more or less ideal. One should go. A manager, if we are not considering these aspects, then the cases of failures will be frequent. So efficient manager will basically select the suppliers based on infrastructure friendly and cost friendly situation. That's the role of the a manager, how to select those vendors or suppliers in this context.
Can you emphasize more on the politically correct strategy? What is it exactly?
Well, I have explained it because the typical Mac burger we know is only beef or pork. That's the popular hamburger in the global issues. When McDonald's decided to come to India, basically they thought it is not feasible. You have to accept the reality. So only way they can say introduce the Maharaja burgers, for example, mutton concepts. And then a significant population are basically vegetarian as well. So for them they introduce the veggie burger. You know, these are the two aspects. You cannot find anywhere mutton burger or veggie burger any part of the world. And this is only meant for India. How they have is a reality. Political curriculum is a reality, and you accept the reality, and then you take action, operate according to these conditions. That's the manager, and a manager should be aware of this kind of situation. If manager is not understanding it, that is a problem. There's a company who is may fail because of that kind of not understanding that kind of reality.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my last question is about the employment opportunity. With their expansion strategy, have McDonald's really increased the employment opportunity in the country? Because when it is MNC, we are more
capital displacement.
Yeah.
Now here is basically McDonald's in America, for example, it may have few number of people. I mentioned on average in both direct effect and indirect effect. As far as McDonald's particular outlet is concerned, according to the source of the McDonald's data, is about 100 people in a particular outlet, both directly and indirectly employed. Directly means the front jobs, cooks, then the distributors, then you have the client services, cashiers, all the people are involved. indirect, if you see the whole supply chain, suppose in McBurger I showed, there are how many companies are involved? Say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 companies are involved in supplying these kind of things. So in other words, these are the people who is basically indirectly involved in terms of supplying those products to employers are created according to that condition. So it's not that employment effect is not negative, it is positive, highly positive, so far McDonalds is concerned.
So
both direct and indirect.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we come to the close of the session with this good note that the employment opportunity has been increased by these outlets around the country. I thank you all for your kind participation, and I thank Professor Arindam Bonik, IMI, for his great presentation. I thank you all, and bye.